Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy. So, what do you got for us today, Claire?
We have the story of the death of 10-year-old Shakisha Lloyd and her two great aunts.
You like the kid ones, don't you?
I don't, but just like we've said in the beginning, just because you don't know about it doesn't mean this shit doesn't happen.
True.
Just
You wanna give
raising
us
awareness.
Do you want to give us your trigger warnings aside from the fact that a 10-year-old's apparently going to be killed?
Some definite molestations going on, both on children, teenagers, a lot of shotgun blasts, a couple fingers fly off. That's it.
Oh,
Oh,
lovely.
and if people are sensitive to the death penalty.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll start with Pamela Lloyd, who is Shakisha's mother. So she meets this guy, Edward Lagrone. He is, by the way, this is in 1985. So when Pamela meets Edward, he's actually on parole for a murder he committed when he was 19.
Wow.
Yeah.
Stand-up guy. Okay.
So he was
Why is he out?
So he was convicted in 1977. Like I said, he was 19. He received a 20-year sentence and then was paroled after serving 7 years and was released in 84. So
Good old reliable 70s.
So she meets him roughly a year after he gets out, right? And they briefly date for about 6 months. Now, Pamela at this point has 4 children. After their breakup, the Lloyd family maintains contact with him, so I would assume that would mean it wasn't that bad of a breakup if they're gonna still maintain contact. But he would intermittently come over and spend time with the children.
That's weird,
Now,
but okay.
I'm gonna give you a little bit background on Edward because I want you to understand the fact that he still comes over and is allowed to spend time with the children, and already knowing that he's on parole for being a murderer.
Right.
But anywho, so the following incidences are just a background of this is after she dated him, but before we get to the death of 10-year-old Shakisha. On February 23rd in 1986, 15-year-old sisters were walking home after they went to Dairy Queen. While they were crossing the grounds of a local elementary school, Edward approached them, threatened them with a gun, took their money, forced them to remove their clothes, tied them up, and forced one of them to perform oral sex on him and then molest the other sister.
Good Lord. How old was he?
In his 30s.
Wow. Okay.
So now there is conflicting information on sources to whether these were his own sisters.
Ew.
Yes. So I don't know. I mean, it's disgusting either way, but it's definitely really fucking disgusting if he had one of his sisters suck
Blow
him
him?
off. Yes. But so he threatens the girls that if they go to the police, that he's going to burn down their homes, so they don't go to the authorities. Now, in October 1990, now the Fort Worth Police Department, they're doing a routine investigation of drug trafficking and receive a tip about a local drug trafficker, which lead them to Edward, which they end up trying to pursue him. When they confront him near his apartment complex, he runs up some stairs, attempts to get rid of a bag. I mean, you know the scene from Cops. So he tries to chunk it. They pick it up. The lab confirms later it's cocaine. So I'm just trying to give you an idea of, keep in mind, all this shit happens and he still will wander on over and hang out with this lady's kids.
I wonder.
So in my mind, I'm going, this guy's a piece of shit.
Well, it makes me question the mom. I'm not trying to blame her. Is she alive still? Do we know?
I don't know.
Okay,
But
so it makes me question her because I would think that if maybe she was sleeping with her drug dealer kind of deal,
so we'll get
keeps him
there
around. Okay.
because she does have a drug history and she's not by any leaps or bounds void of a criminal history. So there's that issue. But so that happened in October. In December, he's a suspect for a double homicide of a woman and her brother. Now, there
What?
isn't sufficient evidence to proceed with charges, but in that case, a man burst into the apartment, shot Clifton Demerzen, who was 39, and his sister, who was 40. Now, Edward, the way he's connected to this is he had previously dated Mary's daughter, and then there were allegations on him sexually assaulting another member of the family. Again, enough evidence to pursue him in this case, so it kind of just died. I'm just trying to paint you a picture of the kind of individual Edward is.
He's a wonderful individual, world class. He's a gem.
Yeah. So now that's in December. Now by March 3rd, the Fort Worth Police Department witnessed Edward flagging down cars in a manner consistent with drug dealing. So the officer, he's just keeping tabs on him. He sees Edward toss a black pouch to the ground, which is later determined to contain crack cocaine. He's
Is this
arrested and
again, or is this the same bag?
yes. Nope, different one. So
Oh,
it was in October of the year before when they knock on his door because they were investigating drug trafficking. This
I know. This
is
time they spot him
yeah.
flagging
So
cars. Gotcha.
yeah, so October, that's when they go to his house. December is when he becomes a double homicide suspect. Now we're in March and they watch him flag down different cars, sell cocaine, and then they watch him chunk the bag to the ground. I imagine he realized they were watching him try to ditch it. But so
Hmm.
he's arrested and then released on $44,000 bond for possession of a controlled substance with the intent to distribute. Now, again, bear in mind, this is all happening while he's still going over there and hanging out with the Lloyd family children.
Yeah,
So
that's not a red flag right there.
now that brings us back to the family. In May, Pamela is the mother to Shakisha, our victim, notices that 10-year-old Shakisha's body is changing and that her breasts and midsection were getting bigger. It
I
also
mean,
was one evening during bath time that Shakisha said that she felt something moving inside her body.
what?
Now, because this seemed unnatural, Pamela took Shakisha to the local hospital for an examination where she learned Shakisha was 17 weeks pregnant.
Holy shit.
Yes.
What?
Now, bearing all this
Wait,
in
how old is
mind,
she?
10. She just completed the 4th grade.
The fuck?
Yeah. Now, hold your what the fucks because Shakisha tells her mother of the assaults by Edward, who was then 34,
Oh my gosh.
and that this relationship, if you want to call it that, had been ongoing for the last 2 years.
What?
That means he started fucking this little girl at 8.
Poor baby.
Like, how fucking disgusting is that?
That's foul. And it's not a question of how I feel about pedophiles. I say string him up by his testicles, chop his dick off, and shove it down his fucking throat. Because
Yeah.
no, this is my meanness score, people. Fuck with kids, and I feel like you deserve to be tortured. If you don't agree with me, you're a pedophile.
Well, I was absolutely horrified because it's just, I can't say what the fuck enough. 8 years
No,
old.
that's sick. First of all, can I just say I didn't realize a 10-year-old could get pregnant. Don't like
I did not realize either. So it had to have been a case of as soon as she was able
she didn't
to.
even start her period. She didn't even get a chance to start her period before she became
So
pregnant.
not to turn this on to dogs, but it's just I have more experience with dogs than knocked up little children. But
Oh, I would hope
but
so.
but I do know that with like dogs, before they have their first heat, it's possible for them to get pregnant as well. I mean, it's life threatening because they're not their bodies aren't mature, so they can't handle the stress of that, and you can end up having the dog die because it can't carry a pregnancy to term.
Yeah. Makes
So I would imagine it's the similar situation of generally you don't have to worry about it because you don't have an 8-year-old sexually active.
Where the hell was her mom?
So again, I'm gonna go
Is
with
dad not
he
in the
had
picture?
a drug problem. So this whole case is driveled and people in and out of jail and definitely drugs related. Not
Mhm.
everybody in the family, but I feel like dad's not a winner, mom's not a winner, and clearly she's got questionable choices in men. But so I would imagine either dad's on drugs as well or he's in jail.
Alright.
Um, so Pamela contacts the police department about Edward's rape of her daughter, which, by the way, I don't know at what point, I guess I could have looked it up, but when it became mandatory, because I feel like if a 10-year-old is test positive for being pregnant, I mean, how is that not automatically reported?
Yeah, I was just about to say, when is the hospital
It,
liable for calling the police? That's, like,
yeah,
sexual abuse at its
highest.
top notch. Can't argue it. Was not consensual. Doesn't fucking matter if it's consensual. She was 8. She ugh,
Well, now she's 10, but my mind went to she's 17 weeks pregnant. When was her birthday?
oh god,
Like, did
poor
she just
baby.
like, this is so disgusting. But anywho, so she calls the police to report the rape of her daughter.
I
Now
wonder if she was, okay, never mind. Just I mm. So, I realize I'm gonna upset some people here, but if mom's a druggie, the guy's a druggie, do you think she was aware of what he was doing to her daughter and then just kept turned a blind eye to it because she was getting drugs?
I don't
And then the only reason
think
she reported it is because she had taken her daughter to the hospital, and at that point, if you don't do something to protect your child, you get brought into question as to, like,
I
where you're
don't
at liability-wise?
I don't know. I mean, she's not charged in that. I do know shit like that does happen, so I can't say I eliminate that one. Um, mm, but I mean, it's possible. But in response to that, the police department take Pamela to Edward's Arlington apartment, which I thought
What?
was weird. I don't know if it was a case, could you point him out? But in my mind, I also did the whole. So if the guy went to jail before as a murderer, they should have his picture. So I don't know why they would take her to the apartment to confront him, but I scratched my head on that one. But Edward's not home, his sister is. So she tells the sister to have Edward call her when he gets home. Now, now the police department, their stance on this one was due to a heavy caseload is why Edward wasn't immediately arrested when she reported the rape of her daughter
Where was this?
in Texas.
So I sure hope Texas got their shit together because I feel like a pregnant 10-year-old warrants finding the
Well,
fucker that did it.
now I'm not saying it doesn't, but I would imagine if their caseload is that heavy that arresting somebody who knocks up a 10-year-old is towards the bottom of the list. What the fuck is going on there?
Yeah. So, like I said, I hope they got their shit together because if a 10-year-old that's pregnant by a 30 some odd year old man is at the bottom of the list of priorities, like the
Yeah.
okay,
But that
sorry.
was their
Go on.
stance on why he's still milling around as we
Mhm.
progress to this. So when Ed finally calls Pamela back, um, she asks him how he could have messed around with Shakisha, which that was quoted, by the way. So I was like, messed around? Messed around? Like, that's what teenagers do in the back of their car. That's not what a 34-year-old
Consensual,
man
yes.
and a 10-year-old are not messing around. But Edward started denying having sexual relations with Shakisha, which again, my mind went, sexual relation? What the fuck? But anywho,
It's
so
rape.
he
This is called
denies.
rape. You didn't have a sexual relationship. You were raping a child.
Yeah.
But
So,
continue. Sorry.
however that conversation went, he denies having sex with her. So Pamela hangs up on his ass because, again, she's a 10-year-old. Exactly how many times you think she's had sex with different people? Asshole. So she hangs up, but Edward calls back later in the day because I think at some point it clicks in his head that if she's pregnant, he can't exactly deny that forever.
He's going to end up on Maury.
So later that day, he calls Pamela back to tell her that he's sorry for what he had done to Shakisha and that he would be willing to help take care of the baby.
Wait, like raise it?
I don't know what helping meant for his ass, but Pamela responds with outrage because Edward just admitted to molesting Shakisha. He
No.
also, I
Raped.
guess,
He raped her.
yeah. Well, so I guess somewhere in the conversation, she wanted to know how many times, and he admitted to at least 9.
So if it was one, that was excusable, but then no, one time is one time too many. The number of times wouldn't matter.
Now, I also thought it was weird because in this phone call, it says that she threatened to press charges, to which my mind was like, "So I thought we already did that. That's why the police are involved." But it's just like, why is it even a thing of, "Would you like to press charges?" That that it shouldn't be up to the mom anyhow. Like,
No, it shouldn't.
I'm not saying it is, but apparently during this phone call, she threatens to press charges. So the next day, Shakisha contacts Edward via his beeper. Now, I
Wait, the
don't.
little girl?
Yes. Now, I had to read it twice because I was like, wait, what? But then I suppose out of all this, she could have been conditioned that, you
Like
know,
groomed. Yeah.
yes.
Like
Because
she's
you
in love with
figure,
him.
yes.
Poor
So
baby.
the thing is, I don't know why she tried to reach out to him, but
Or maybe the mom did it.
so now when she does do that, that Pamela uses the opportunity when he responds to inform him that Shakisha wants an abortion, which would cost $895.
When was
Now,
this? This was in the
1991,
80s. Oh,
91.
90s.
They started dating late 80s.
That's no, I'm not I've never had an abortion. I'm not shaming anyone that has, but that seems really expensive for
My guess would be keep in mind this is like 4 or 5 months, like 17 weeks.
still. It seems really expensive. I don't know.
I don't
I don't know
know.
what the going rate is for an
That's what I was
abortion
gonna
now, let
say.
alone in
I
the early
don't
90s
I
or for
don't
a child.
Yeah. So Edward responds by assuring Pamela that he would absolutely provide the money for the abortion. Now, at this time, bear in mind Edward is on parole for the murder he was convicted of in 1977 that he was released in 84. So
Why
if
didn't he get
Pamela
picked?
So I don't even know why he didn't go back to jail of a number of drug charges. I thought that's how parole worked. If you misbehave, you go back to jail.
Yeah. And if he had a probation officer the second that this shit came to light, it should have been really easy to stick his ass in jail. If they can't get back to it, he's being accused of raping and impregnating a freaking 10-year-old.
Now, also
It should
bear
have
in
been really
mind,
easy to slap his ass in jail.
on top of all of that, of what we already know he did. Now I get the 2 girls, which may or may not have been his sisters, he molested, and the police don't know about that. But
Mhm.
he's also December, like, not even 6 months ago, was a suspect in a double homicide. So, this guy is all over the place. I don't see how it wouldn't be too easy to go, "Drug charges, you go finish your sentence."
Yeah, just get him off the streets. Anything.
But I also don't know if at this point, if we're going the route of the police department is understaffed and too many cases to sort through, if
Yeah.
that since at this point he's just a parole violator, naturally he's at the bottom of the pile, which he's just pluck or adding to his little resume of shit. But so that's where his mind is at with the whole if he gets charged with rape, he's absolutely going back to jail. Also in my mind, I was like, "Well, you're going there regardless, fella." But on Wednesday, May 29th, 1991, Edward attempted to get Pamela to drop her complaint by offering her $1,000 for the abortion and an extra 500 for herself.
Okay,
I
so
know.
I 100,000% believe that the mom was aware of what was going on with the little girl in the sky because for him to
So,
think that he could buy her off.
well, she doesn't take it, and she does not withdraw her complaint.
Yes, but at that point, the authorities are involved because she took her daughter to the hospital and it's now confirmed that her daughter is impregnated. Like, it's not like she's a 16, 17-year-old girl that the hospital is going to be like, it's a teenage pregnancy. She's freaking 10. I feel like the mom at this point has been backed into a corner and has
Yeah,
to do something. Otherwise, she's going to be held accountable. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
So now, mind you, he calls to propose that on Wednesday.
What?
She says no with the whole offering her money.
Oh, I thought you were saying he called and proposed. I was like, wait,
Oh,
what?
sorry, wrong.
Fucking marry a 10-year-old now? What the marry the mom? Who the what? Okay. Okay.
So, well, so when she says no, he calls her back later in the day and does the whole, "Fine, I'll be over Thursday to give you the money for the abortion." But Edward had no intention of handing over any money. That
Of course
same
not.
day that he had called her back, he takes his then girlfriend, friend, whatever she is, Annette Daniel, to a gun store, to purchase a gun. Now, he provides her with the money because obviously he can't go in there and buy a gun.
Yeah, he's a
So
criminal.
he gives Annette money to purchase a double-barreled pistol grip shotgun, to which she does purchase, walks out of the store, and gives it to Edward, who puts it in the trunk of his car.
Does she get a charge for anything in this?
No, not that I know of. She's not
She
mentioned
should.
after this, but abso-fucking-lutely.
She's providing what I'm assuming it becomes the murder weapon.
Yes. Now, I did find it funny because later on in the trial, the employee of the gun store testifies that the shotgun qualifies as a deadly weapon. I know I shouldn't have laughed, but I did because who needs to be told a shotgun is a deadly weapon? I feel like
An
if you need to
idiot.
I feel like if you need to be told that, get the fuck out of the gun store. How about that?
Yeah. Like, no. Okay.
But anywho, so Thursday morning, Pamela gets up around 4 a.m. to get some water from the kitchen because she's having trouble sleeping.
Too many drugs. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the Lloyd family was living at 2004 Amanda Street in Fort Worth. Now, the Lloyd family includes a total of 8 people, 3 of which are our homicide victims, which include 10-year-old Shakisha Lloyd and Shakisha's 2 great aunts. Now, her great aunts
Wait.
are
So I'm assuming all these people know this little girl's pregnant and this guy was coming over and there's two more grown ass adults that are living there and nobody said or did anything.
there's more than that because I'm listening to who is in the house. But so her great aunts, 83-year-old Zenoba Anderson and 76-year-old Kaula Lloyd are those are our 3 victims. But in addition to them, there's 5 survivors that are in the home. Pamela Lloyd, which is Shakisha's mother, Shakisha's 3 siblings, and Dempsey Lloyd, who is Shakisha's uncle. So that's a total of 4 adults that would be in this home. I assume they weren't all home at the same time when he would come over, but when was he having sex with this little girl?
Yeah. Like, no, there's no way that these kids were that's 4 adults. You're telling me these 4 adults? Do we know their age ranges?
I don't know how old the uncle is or Pamela's brother. But I know we've got 2
They're
elderly
adults, though,
people.
correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Now
Well,
now the 2 elderly people, I imagine it was easy to get stuff by on them, but
but
I
they're home.
well, and if you take into account Pamela on drugs, he could easily have brought her over a fix. She passes out, and then you've got 2 elderly people who won't hear a thing. And if he was, like, grooming poor little Shakisha, it's not like he forcibly raped her. I mean, I know she can't consent, but it's one of those, if she's not gonna be screaming out for help or anything, it's easier.
Okay, so I'm not gonna be I'm sorry in advance for putting it out there, but unless he has a really tiny penis,
He
that could
might
not have felt good to her because 8 years old, that is a tiny little body that is not meant for a grown ass man's penis,
ever.
ever.
Well, I don't know. I'm just telling you, that's how many people lived in the house.
Shame on all of them. I realize some of them become dead, but
Yeah, well, that's
if
why I
you have
said this
kids living
whole
with I feel like if you have kids living in your household, it is your job as an adult, especially if you're related to those kids, to make sure that you are looking out for their best interest. Like, kids
yeah.
don't deserve to be abused in any way, shape, or form, and it's absolutely disgusting. Ugh, I don't like the kid cases, Claire.
Well, I just don't understand how it happens when you have a house full of people. But anywho, so Pamela gets up early in the morning. She goes to the kitchen for some water. Now, after she leaves the kitchen, she goes into the bathroom and somebody knocks at the front door while she's in the bathroom.
At
And
4 o'clock in the morning?
evidently, and
Okay.
whoever's knocking demands somebody come open the door. Now,
Right,
Shakisha's
because that's gonna make me open the door.
now Shakisha's brother Charles identifies the voice as Edward's, but he doesn't open the door. Uncle
Smart guy.
Dempsey goes to the door and opens it and asks Edward, what is he doing there at such an early hour? To which Edward answers with a shotgun blast to the uncle.
Oh, gosh.
Now, I don't know where he got hit the first time, but it doesn't instantly kill him or anything. And yeah, this is the gun that was purchased earlier the day before.
Mhm.
But they kind of wrestle with the gun. I don't know at what point adrenaline stops, but Uncle Dempsey goes down and I guess lays there for a bit because after that struggle, Edward goes to the front room where 76-year-old Cowla is sleeping and fires a shot. Now, Cowla is blind and ravaged with terminal cancer, and I mean, obviously, she dies from the gunshot wound to her neck. I don't know what occurred in that front room, but they do say in the records that she must have put her hands up defensively because he blows off one of her fingers with that shotgun blast. So she had to have gone to, which I don't
Protect.
know. I guess she had really good like cat-like reflexes because if she was sleeping and blind, how did she know to put her hands up?
Yeah.
But it could be the
He coulda
shotgun
ran his
blast
mouth. Yeah.
that kinda woke her up, but that's where she was sleeping. But
Well, and
anywho,
I would assume that not only did she wake up to whatever scuffle with the uncle,
yeah.
but the shotgun, and then obviously at that point you're awake, you hear somebody come in the room, you would put your hands up like, "What the hell's going on?" Or because if she can't see, she has no idea who it is.
So
She
I
just knows
wasn't
something's going on.
yeah, so I also wasn't sure if it was one of those cases of where she's legally blind, but that doesn't mean she can't see, like, at
Mm,
all. So
true.
could have been a case of that. So she's just seeing shapes, then it's just a brightness. She puts her hand up kinda thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's what I imagined at least. So he shoots her in the neck, then goes into the kitchen where 83-year-old Zenobia was washing clothes and
What? It's
fired.
4 o'clock in the morning.
So I was kind of thinking of dad, how old people have weird hours.
Yeah.
So that's where my head went to, or they got up freakishly early because they start their day freakishly early. But so she's washing clothes. He shoots her in the back of the neck.
What's with him and shooting people in the neck? Good
because
God.
he's a fucking coward. But
Or a
let's
really bad
keep in
shot.
mind his victims thus far are raping an 8 to 10-year-old and then killing 2 elderly people.
And molesting 2 teenage girls.
Yes, them too. So Pamela and Shakisha during this, like when he's going room to room, they're trying to collect the other children and hide them while all this is going on. Now, Shakisha was not with her mom. I guess they split up. I don't know how the house was laid out. But Edward, I guess, comes down the hall, and that's where Shakisha is. Shakisha cries out to her mother. Pamela hears 2 shots fired. She runs to where she heard it come from, and that's when Pamela discovers Shakisha lying on the floor with half of her face blown off
Oh my
and an
God.
injury to her right hand, which had caused her ring finger to be dismembered. So it's later in the report that Shakisha had been shot in the left cheekbone, and she had been protecting her 19-month-old sister, who she had concealed behind boxes. Now, Uncle Dempsey, who Edward shot coming into the house, he didn't die with that gunshot. But on Edward's way out, Uncle Dempsey is pleading for mercy, which he should have just been quiet. Lay there and play dead.
Yeah, freaking play dead, dude.
But he pleads for mercy from Edward. Edward shoots him a second time before leaving the home. Now, miraculously, Uncle Dempsey is still not dead. So I don't know what he's made of, but not only is he not dead after being shot with a shotgun twice, but he manages to drag himself next door and have the neighbors call 911 despite his severe wounds, which I think is
That's
absolutely crazy.
that's impressive. That's some serious adrenaline.
He had to have been a big dude is all I can figure. Because if he were a little twiggy man, he'd have had some, I mean, not saying he didn't have serious damage, but if he were a smaller person, saying the bigger holes would be a problem. When Uncle Dempsey's dragging himself next door to call 911, Pamela's at the house with her 3 surviving children, to which I understand that this is a fucked up situation, but she let her uncle drag himself, or I guess it's her brother, but she let him drag himself to the neighbors to call 911 while she stayed with the children.
She didn't get shot. She's not injured at all.
So
She's perfectly fine.
that was the other thing that I thought was weird.
Okay, so I'm gonna say mom was 100% involved. I don't have proof of that. That's just my very, very, very biased opinion that that was their way of getting rid of the problem.
Yeah, so I thought it was weird that she lived and was unscathed. I also thought it was weird that the other kids, he didn't try to kill the other kids. I don't know if it's because they were small, so they're not a threat, or if he didn't see them, they wouldn't have known who did it. But I would assume he thought Uncle Dempsey was dead, but he would know Pamela was alive. Why didn't he kill her? If he would have killed everybody, I think it would have been a little bit more of a head scratching. I mean, until they realized Shakisha was pregnant, then they would kind of piece it together. But he left witnesses.
Yeah. No, I think mom was involved.
But
I think this was how to get rid of the problem.
I also thought of it the other way of if he had to reload the shotgun, or maybe he didn't have enough rounds, maybe he dropped them. That you know how loud that is when you fire a
No,
shotgun.
no, 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 no. He shot the uncle first, correct? Then he
Mhm.
shot the aunt, then he shot the other aunt, then he shot the little girl, right?
Yeah,
Sees mom, does not shoot her. He still has bullets because he goes back on his way out and
true,
shoots the uncle again.
true.
So, no,
But
no.
I also don't know if since the uncle was still by the front door, he shot him a second time because he didn't know he was alive and was shooting him on his way out. But
Yeah, but
again,
he still left mom alive.
I know that, but he also the clock is ticking. This is close quarter residential living, so you can only fire a shotgun. I don't care what time it is, so many times before that wakes the neighbors.
So I don't know much about this area of Texas back in the early 90s, but I'm going to say since he's an active drug dealer, She's got whatever criminal history she's got. I'm going to say that this isn't exactly the best area, and perhaps gunfire at any hour of the evening is not really alarming.
I would still say shotgun blasts, Andrea. Several of them.
Yeah, but if you go into like the super ghetto ass areas that have a lot of crime, I don't know if it's necessarily too much of a red flag. And the whole snitches get stitches kind of mentality. Like, I don't know.
Perhaps. Now, multiple eyewitnesses identify Edward as the shooter
Well, no
and
shit.
would lead to his arrest. Now,
Fuck.
in lieu of $3.45 million bail, he remains in jail until trial. Now, during the investigation, Arthur Eisenberg, a forensic pathologist, compared Edward's blood samples with those recovered from Shakisha Lloyd and conducted a DNA test to establish paternity of Shakisha's baby. Dr. Eisenberg concluded that Edward's paternity of Shakisha's unborn child was 99.99% accurate, and that with the exception of having an identical twin brother, Edward was the father. Now, at trial, Edward's lawyers would claim that the murders were drug related and committed by others and he was innocent.
Mm-hmm.
The defense claimed that Pamela was a crack addict and the murders were linked to her drug problem. Now,
I don't doubt it.
I did laugh at a couple of these points because Anderson, Edward's son, who was at the time serving a life prison sentence for a murder he committed in 1992, testified on his father's behalf that another man was responsible for the killings, to which I scratched my head and laughed because the guy wasn't even there. How did they put a convicted murderer on the stand to speak on the behalf of his father's innocence? That didn't make any sense. They were
Your
grasping at
only
straws.
your only credible witness is someone that wasn't there and is also incarcerated. It's a hell of a defense.
And now the prosecution put several eyewitnesses on the stand that testified that Edward was, in fact, the one who pulled the trigger.
No shit.
The two sisters that Edward terrorized and assaulted at gunpoint in 1986 on their way home from Dairy Queen, they also testified at his trial about what he did to them.
Well, how did the police track them down?
I really don't know. So this is where it goes into the realm of I couldn't find these girls' names, and then when stumbled on the fact that some people say that they were his sisters, it would make sense if they were his sisters because the police would run into them easier. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's some credibility on that, but since they're minors, their names are not listed or provided. So, and I don't think it's much of a stretch to think that a man who's going to have sex with an 8-year-old, he would also molest his sisters. So they testify what he did to them. Now, Billy Lloyd, Pamela's uncle, recalls warning his niece to steer clear of Edward in the late 1980s. Now, on the streets, Edward was well known and much feared, he said. He also had the reputation of selling drugs and had served time for murder and was known for being very mean.
Why
He
is he
told,
even out?
fuck if I know, Andrea. It's just
Like, seriously, the 70s really needed to get their shit together with court. Because this is just like with our Mad Chopper case. If that dipshit, Larry Singleton, didn't get out of jail, he got a 14-year sentence for all the shit he did to that little 15-year-old and got out after 7 years and 9 months. And now you've got this fuckwad who was convicted of murder. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Now, Billy Lloyd would go on to say that she didn't want nothing to do with this man. He was a horrible, horrible man, and everybody knew it. Now, looking back, Pamela now agrees, but blames her constant use of crack cocaine as clouding her judgment and that she was charmed by him. To which I say, no, he was just providing her with her drugs.
He was her drug dealer.
Yeah.
And you will not convince me otherwise that she didn't get a discount on her drugs so that he could go dip his
Play with.
wiener in in her daughter. Like, that's fucking
That's
foul, and
so
she
is
should have been
that
charged.
phrase, by the way. Dip his wiener in her child. Fucking disgusting, Andrea. But anywho, she would say he was nice to the children and would buy them presents and stuff.
And the one for the little 8-year-old was his penis.
No, she would claim she did not know until just days before the killing
Lies.
that Edward had done much more than charm her children. Now, I also think he probably touched the other ones too. Like, I know you've heard or at least read or are aware of the cases where people will rape little babies and they'll like die. I wouldn't be surprised if he was going that realm of the 18-month-old.
Oh God.
It's just disgusting. So naturally, Edwards was found guilty of capital murder in May 1993 and was sentenced to death.
Yay.
Now, Edward would argue that his rights to due process, equal protection of the law, and the prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment was violated because Texas does not offer the sentence of life without parole. Now, at the time of his conviction, had Edward been sentenced to life in prison, he would have been eligible for parole in 15 years. Now,
What?
obviously, if that would have been the case, if he wouldn't have gotten the death penalty. So the jury saw it as the fact that they didn't want this guy back out on the streets. So they saw it as they only had one option. And it's because of the nature of his crime that the jury decided that they had no other option than to sentence him to death, which I
How about the
agree.
fact that he's a repeat fucking offender on a murder charge?
Well,
Like,
no, no,
even
no,
if
no.
you choose to ignore everything else, he murdered somebody, went to jail, got out, did all the shit that he did to these kids, and murdered
So,
3
right.
more people.
So
Like,
that's what the jury was mulling over, that because of that's what they were facing. If he was sentenced to life in prison, he would have the option of parole in 15 years. So it was either between that or giving him the death penalty. And they didn't want him to have the chance of getting out because Texas doesn't have a life without parole option. It's either you have an
n-
opportunity at life again, or we're putting your ass down. We're not footing the bill the rest of your life.
well, good on that
So
jury.
that's why they did the option of sentencing him to death. Now, Edward would whine, bitch, and complain and say he was a victim of the American justice system, to which I rolled my eyes heavily. He's the victim in this? Fuck you.
Hmm. I
So
wholeheartedly agree.
he was executed by lethal injection on February 11th, 2004 in Huntsville, Texas. He was at the time 47 years old. Now, I say, way to go, Texas, because they did not sit on that. From the
Yeah, that was
time he
quick.
was found, yeah, from the time he was found guilty to the time they stuck the needle in his arm was less than 10 years.
Good job, Texas. I
So,
think it's probably because there was only so much he could appeal, you know?
well, and he really, his pattern of shit, he, like, he had so many witnesses that he did the shit. But, now I know Texas will get a lot of shit because they are responsible for over a third of all the executions since 1976. So, I say way to go, Texas. That,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
now mind you, I realize there are people who fall through the cracks and are wrongly convicted that scenario, but this guy deserved every bit of what he got.
Hell yeah, he did. And then some.
So
I
Edwards
wholeheartedly believe in torture for pedophiles. You can dislike me. I don't care. I wholeheartedly, 150,000% of my soul believes that pedophiles, child abusers, all deserve to be tortured. Like, I'm talking back in the day kind of shit where they'd hang them when they were at the point of death, bring them down, revive them, gut them, burn them, chop them up, quarter them, fucking do all of it.
the hell do you read at night? Sick. But that's not where my head went so much as that torture. I was hoping that he was the little guy in prison and somebody made him their bitch for the nearly 10 years and he was grateful to be put to death. Like, I hope when he was put to death, his asshole was so big he could have sat on a caution cone without flinching.
That's funny as hell, Claire.
But that's where that's where I went with the torturous things. Just because I figured, well, let's face it, Andrea, they're not going to get away with that level of torture where you were going in jail, but rape happens in jail, so that's what I wished for him.
Well,
But
the kings and queens used to do that form of torture, so
he's not a king, and he
no,
might have turned to a
not
queen,
him.
but
That was a form of punishment.
I'm just saying.
Read some, go watch, like,
We said kings and queens. There's no
yeah,
kings and queens in this story.
King Henry VIII, who's all about torturing people.
I'm not disputing that, but I'm going with the likelihood of what the torture would have consisted of when you take into fact the geographic location and the time period. What was most likely to happen? A gaping asshole is higher on the list than the chopping up and whatever your little hanging asphyxiation thing was.
Well, I'm
So,
just simply saying, if it were up to me, the pedophiles and people that hurt kids would 150,000% receive that form of torture.
okay. Edward's final words. I just want to say I'm not sad or bitter with anybody. Like I said from day one, I didn't go in there and kill them, but I'm no better than the people that did. Jesus is Lord, and that's all I have to say. Now, mind you, he does still cling to he didn't do it, which I'm like, again, eye roll. He also said he didn't rape Shakisha.
No, it was consensual.
Fucking idiot. His
A
final
30-year-old
meal.
having sex with a 10-year-old is 100% consensual.
His final meal was 5 pieces of fried chicken and assorted soft drinks, to which I thought, man, he must have pissed all over when they killed him.
Ew.
Assorted soft drinks? What are you caffeinating up for?
One last swig? I don't know. Hey,
So
are they allowed to have
Edwards,
alcohol for their last meal? Because I would get drunk as
I
shit.
would severely doubt it. I feel like there's a list of things they can request, and if you request things off the list, you get knocked upside your head. So, Edward's execution was witnessed by several of Shakisha's relatives. Her mother, Pamela, however, would not be in attendance because she was currently incarcerated.
Wait, what?
We're going there. Now, Pamela had a lengthy criminal history. She was convicted of petty larceny in 1981 and aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon in 1987. Now, she served 7 months of a 5-year sentence before being paroled. Now, in 1993, now this is after Shakisha's death, but in 1993, she marries Shakisha's father, Gene Tutt, even though the relationship had already started to become abusive. Now, she would say that her motivation was providing a father figure to her children, and she thought that having a man in their life was important.
Yes,
Which
but the quality of the man is what's important.
right? But I also
Also,
feel
the
like
quality of the mother is important.
true. So I feel like she was sort of on the right track, but I feel like there's a whole lot of lack of guidance in this family scenario of you're sort of getting there, but not just any man needs to jump in there. And certainly it doesn't have to be their father that has to play that role.
Well, that was my question, is this multiple fathers to her children, or
So
does she have,
I don't
yeah.
know because it says she married Shakisha's father, which makes me think the other children were not this guy's, but they could have been. I don't know.
Mm.
But again, the
Not that it
relation.
matters. It's just,
No, I don't know. But then my head also went to if he wasn't Shakisha's father, they could have been done with that whole relationship because when Shakisha died, he's got no ties to her.
yeah.
So I feel like he had to have been the father to one of the other kids, if not all of them, only for the fact that he's still coming around and she's trying to cling to that relationship. So they get married, But in November, which is roughly like 4 years later, an argument turns violent. Now, Pamela claims she feared for her life when she went and grabbed a gun and shot Jean to death. Now, she was charged with murder of her husband, Gene Tutt, who was 36, and then later convicted of his murder. Now, it's that murder is why she can't go to the execution of dipshit that killed her child. So she receives a sentence of 5 years in prison. Now, I did like the holy shit, she shot and killed her husband and got 5 years. Now,
Yeah, what?
I feel like he had to have really beat the shit out of her for the jury to give her such a lenient sentence. And it's also prior to this, there were several reports of when they'd had to go out for domestic abuse.
Hmm.
So she
So she
had
could prove a
pre
history of domestic violence.
absolutely. So I also feel like in order to prove that she feared for her life, she had to have been pretty battered.
Yeah.
Now,
What happened to
um,
her kids?
no, she I don't know.
Maybe the
Uh,
uncle with the amazing adrenaline rush?
I do feel like since they were already living with him, I do feel like he took over because he's their last relative. But now Pamela was scheduled to be released July 16th in 2004 of her murdering her husband thing.
Mhm.
And while she was in jail, she said it was her hope to give up drugs and work towards getting her high school diploma because she had dropped out when she was in the 10th grade. But I don't know. I couldn't figure out a follow up whether she did actually get out because it doesn't seem like anybody was concerned about what Pamela did when she got out. But
She crawled
sadly,
back into under a rock where she belongs.
now it was hard to find stuff out because with the kids being minors, I
Mhm.
know they have a right to privacy and all that, and they've lived through a lot. Now, obviously, we know the age of the one that was 19 months old that Shakisha hid and saved that baby's life. I don't know if the guy would have shot her if he saw the baby. I don't know why you would, because it's not like he could testify against you. And he, again, left other people alive. But so I don't know what happened to her. I don't know what happened to the other sister. But her brother Charles, unfortunately, dies of a drug overdose in 2000. He's 22 years old. Now, I feel like poor Charles, you figure he was home when Shakisha got shot. He had to have seen all that goriness, so he lived through that. And then when he was about 15 years old, his mom shoots the either if it was his dad or
His
it wasn't
father
his
figure.
dad. Yeah, the guy who the man of the house. So it's just like I don't blame this kid for not knowing how to deal with that shit. But
Well, and
he
then also prior to the shooting of his sister and his aunts and his uncle,
yeah, there were
he
drugs in that house.
there were drugs in the house, violence in the house, and well, let's not glaze over the fact that there was some sort of sexual abuse occurring in the household. Like, no.
So there's also that because nobody says whether or not now where my head went when 10-year-old Shakisha was pregnant, there were other kids in that house. How do we know he wasn't molesting them all? I mean, the son might not have said anything because didn't want to talk
Yeah,
about it.
shame.
Yeah, that one was for poor Charles. So I'm sad for him that his life was so much of a struggle as well. But fuck, this case was just like, how do you expect anybody to break free of that? When it's just like it's such a revolving door of you can't break free of that cycle of drugs, abuse, low income, like
Yeah, like,
the whole thing.
no.
Now, Edward also, I thought it was weird. He also dropped out of school in the 10th grade. At first, I had to double back and read it because it's just like they both of them dropped out of the 10th grade. But basically, this is a public service announcement of stay in school, stay off drugs, don't hit people. I mean, you can break that cycle. Not
And
saying it's
leave kids the
easy.
fuck alone.
Okay, so that's 4 points. Yeah. No touchies.
Claire, I don't like these cases.
Blame Dave. He found it.
Dave, I don't like kid cases. They do something to my soul.
Well, it
And
was
I
really
get it. This shit
disgusting.
happens. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. But like, if it were up to me, I would try to save every child humanly possible and then some because no kids deserve to experience any portion of what those few
No.
kids did. And to know there's so many kids out there that are neglected or abused, it literally breaks my heart.
Yeah. I just
I
still
would
don't also know how when he got out of jail on parole, I don't understand how it wasn't like the first time he was picked up for drugs, how that wasn't an immediate ticket back to jail.
yeah.
Like,
Or
without him getting released, like, that's exactly where you're headed, fella. Not
and not to shame the police department because I do respect law enforcement, but if they had acted way sooner, he wouldn't have been on the loose to go kill this family.
and how about let's shame Annette? She fucking provided him with a gun. There's a
Yeah.
reason that criminals are not allowed to waltz in and buy their own weaponry, especially he's out on parole for murder.
Or how about he impregnated a fucking 10-year-old?
So I can't imagine Annette knew about the knocked up 10-year-old. Otherwise, who the fuck would help somebody in that scenario? Even if he said, "No, no, we had sex. We have a relationship. We're just messing around." No, sir.
No. Yeah. No. Nope. That would be a no for me. Just all
That's
of it.
why that's why I said when I got to the point where it said that so there's a letter he writes. I don't know who the fuck he wrote it to because he talks about how he's a victim, and I did like a major eye roll of like really. I couldn't have been happier to know the guy was dead.
Nope. He needs the cat of nine tails and some whipping and some appendage chopping off and some hot
Well,
oil
and then
treatments
and then
and like
then even then, the fact that his last words are like, "He's not mad at anyone." Well, good, because we were really concerned how you were feeling. Just kidding. We didn't. And I even say that the fact that he got Shakisha pregnant and started molesting and raping her at 8, I think that's worth a death penalty sentence. I'm just saying.
yes.
So the fact that he killed her should have been. I'm glad the jury stuck with the death penalty. And I'm glad they didn't sit on it and let him get an appeal of some sort. Just disgusting.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you for that gem.
Yeah.
That's my new thing. I think these guys, I'm going to just coin the phrase that they're a gem.
His name was Edward.
He's a gem. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mindfucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.